Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and today we have Josh Henkin with us. Josh is a performance coach based out of Phoenix, Arizona. He's learned from some of the best in the business, Charles Poliquin, Paul Chek, John Davies. But what he did is he took a common implement, the Sandbag, and enhanced it into the ultimate Sandbag by adding handles, adding a educational platform with it, creating a certification program to go along with it, and really kind of taking it to the next level. And so I really enjoyed talking to him a little bit about the unique benefits of Sandbag training, along with some of the business side of it. How do you as strength coaches, we always have ideas on how we can create a piece of equipment or a program or things along those lines. So kind of taking an idea or a concept and taking it all the way through fruition. And so really enjoyed sitting down and talking with Josh. As usual, we want to recognize our sole sponsor for Iron Game Chalk Talk, Play Sports Performance Flooring. Here's a install they did recently with the University of Arizona football. Obviously great facility, great program, and constantly doing some great installs and doing some really neat things in the strength and conditioning space right now. They have weight room floors, they have track, they have turf. So there's really not anything that they can't do. So if you're in the market for sports performance flooring, make sure you reach out to these guys and go to their Facebook page, like their Facebook page. You get a chance to see some of these neat facilities, or reach out to them at playusa.com, and they'll get back to you and sit down and have a conversation. So sit back and enjoy this episode with Josh, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, here with Josh Henkin today. Very excited to have him on the show. Josh, appreciate you being here, brother.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ron.
Josh, for everybody that doesn't know as much about you, go into a little bit of how you got into the field and, what are some of the steps that you've taken to get to where you're currently at?
I got into lifting very early on, actually recovering from an ankle injury going into high school. Basketball was my sport, and so when I was rehabbing it, my older brother sort of introduced me to a friend of his at the time, a teacher that was also a strength coach at the university, at the high school, and he was also assistant strength coach for the Chicago White Sox. So he introduced me to the whole career of strength conditioning. I didn't realize that you could basically make a career out of being in the weight room and working with athletes. And because I didn't have any illusions that my athletic career was probably going to expand much beyond high school, I definitely loved the idea of an opportunity to coach athletes and be around sports and be in the weight room. He actually encouraged me to start educating myself right away and got me to, I think it was a NASM or NSCA event when I was just 16. So I started, very early on, loving the idea of learning as much as I could about the industry, the field, and what went into actually being a good coach.
Sure. You there?
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. You're talking about Tim Lang, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, Tim. It's unique story there. One of my first coaches, one of my football coaches, grew up with coaching. Didn't grow up, but had coached with Tim at that same high school.
Okay.
And he was one of the first guys that they pointed me to when I said I wanted to be a strength coach. So him, Steve Maryland, Vern Gambetta, that whole group. It's kind of just amazing how the world turns, isn't it? Dang. You still there? You there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Sorry about that, buddy. We're having all kinds of problems. I can't see you
That's all
now.
right. Yeah, it's turned off my video. I don't know why.
That's interesting. Let me try calling you
Oh,
again
wait.
here.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
You got it?
Yep. Let's see. It's seeing if it likes me. There
There
we
we
go.
go. Got it. Perfect. Well, we'll just we'll roll back into it. So,
Okay.
Josh, one of the things that I'm so envious about with you and I just had Mike Boyle on the show and different guys, is that you get the opportunity to travel the world and learn from some of the best coaches out there, not just domestically but globally. Talk a little bit about the opportunities that you've had to interact with coaches from around the world, and how that's impacted your learning process.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very fortunate in regards. We've been everywhere from Sweden, Italy, Germany, Brazil, up to exotic places like Canada. We're going to be going to Tokyo in Japan very in the fall, and it's very interesting. I think the number one thing I learned, if anything, is it's kind of funny. In the States, we sort of assume that things that are far from us, the more exotic things are, the more ahead people are. The one thing I sort of hear everybody talk about, whether you're in the States or internationally, is everyone sort of assumes that they're way behind everybody else. And to be very honest, I haven't really found that to be the case. In countries that have more access to more things, we can get information better, we can get the tools faster, and you can get ahead. But now with the internet, information travels just so darn fast that it's rare to find someone who's completely unaware of something or has just never heard of a general training system or style before.
Sure. You're the creator of the Ultimate Sandbag, and obviously that's not a new training concept, but it's something that you put a new twist on. You had an idea. Talk a little bit about how you took an existing type of training, had an idea, and then kind of took it into a business and with certifications and the whole deal.
Sure. I mean, originally I sort of had the same preconception that a lot of people did, that when you said sandbag training, that was a pre-existing system, like you said, but really it wasn't. Because if I asked most coaches to tell me what is a sandbag training system, they could probably tell me nothing.
Sure.
They could probably name off a few exercises, but that's not a system.
Sure.
I always give the analogy to coaches. If I said, Ron, today we're going to do our barbell training, you'd probably look at me kind of funny and go, well, I don't know what that means. Are we doing powerlifting? Are we doing bodybuilding? Are we doing Olympic lifting? Are we doing functional training? So one thing I found as I did research upon, sandbag training, if you will, was that there was very little information about how to implement it. I think, I read a lot of books that were, some were over 100 years old, and collectively there's probably a total of 50 pages in all the books I read of anything to do with the sandbag. And that was one book that was kind of devoted to it that was like 30 pages long. So there really wasn't a system. And, I always tell people, if sandbags have been around for so long, as we know they have, and yet they're almost never a cornerstone of a strength and conditioning program, that leads me to believe one of two things. One, they don't work. Or B, they work and we just don't know how to implement them well because we don't have the right system, we don't have the right vehicle in which to implement them. So I like to believe in the second reason rather than the first. So, going down that idea, I really didn't have a idea of making this into a business. It was basically, fiddling around with homemade sandbags myself, as a methodology, sort of a bridge. Basically, I was looking to see where old-time strongmen, any connections that old-time strongmen had. And the one thing they all sort of talked about was the idea of odd object lifting. Now, they all did it differently and all used different tools, but they all sort of had that same thought process of using something that was going to bridge basically real life and lifting weights.
Sure.
And I thought that was a really interesting concept. So, I tried fiddling around that myself. And again, not having a lot of direction, I basically did probably what a lot of people do, which is I just tried to replicate some barbell lifts. And I liked that. It was hard. It was challenging. And, I got some results for a short amount of time. But then just as quickly as the results came, they started to become stagnant. And then when I really thought about it, I really sort of started to laugh at myself at the idea that I had done what I always tell coaches not to do, where I was just using an implement for variety's sake, and I didn't have a rationale, I didn't have a thought process, I didn't have progressions, I didn't really have an ideology to go along with it. So, a friend of mine actually said to me, if you could do things differently, what would you do? And I said, this is why I would do the actual implement, because I think the implement itself is quite limiting. And once we got, the Ultimate Sandbag first, generation type stuff going, I still didn't have any interest in making a business or even thought of it making a business. I basically just wanted something that was going to work better for myself and my clients. And then a couple of colleagues were like, well, I want one too, and I want one. And so we made a few off the first sort of round, but then still we didn't have a system because it was the first time we had the right tool to even utilize in strength conditioning programs. So over the next few years, we actually started working with clients every day and like, hey, look at what that does, and look how this works, and look what we're able to build progression wise if we do this. And it started becoming something much more, and that sort of was the beginning of where we're at now.
You touched a little bit about the history of Sandbags. What is some of that history that you found in those 50 pages of
Sure. I mean, and just give you some context too. I mean, if you look up Olympic weightlifting, I mean, you can find literally thousands of pages
Sure.
About Olympic weightlifting, and to find only 50 pages about sandbag training is quite comical, I think, to say the least. Basically, it was everyone understood that it was a very unique implement, and one of the reasons I chose it to even start to fool around with it in the beginning was it was unlike something else. And I'll give you an example. I remember. I'm a big kettlebell fan, but I remember the early days of kettlebells, even myself going, well, that's a lot like a dumbbell.
Yep.
And, and there are a lot of parallels that like people make, oh, that's kind of like this. And sandbags are just so completely unique in their functionality that I think a lot of people naturally drift to them. Now, obviously, in the early years, there's also an accessibility thing. A lot of people forget metal is very, very expensive, and was probably even more expensive back in 100 years ago for the average person to attain.
Sure.
So it was much more reasonable to get a bag of something, if you will, the rice or whatever it was. Right. So I think there was a little bit of a necessity factor, ingenuity, and I think there was an understanding of why it was different, but really no one sort of put together a comprehensive system and started really looking at how we could get more out of it, and could it be more than what people think it is.
So what are those unique benefits, for the college strength and conditioning coach, the professional strength and conditioning coach? Why is it should be maybe more of a mainstay in their program?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's several reasons. One of the ones that probably gets overlooked the most is that when we talk about strength conditioning, I mean, I think inherently coaches know that just working on linear strength is not sufficient.
Lost you again.
We're making progress almost.
Go ahead. Start with
Sure.
The linear strength.
Well, so I think a lot of coaches, sort of realize that linear strength is not the answer. I mean, I don't think a lot of strength coaches understand that the industry itself is quite young. So a lot of strength coaches, in the early years of strength conditioning, came from backgrounds of powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting, and that's why you see those factors so prevalent today. I think people sort of assume that those are the methodologies that work the best, but to be honest, they're just the ones that have been used for the longest period of time. And I think with the age of functional training, with people like you mentioned, like Vern Gambetta, we realized that strength conditioning had to be much more for an athlete rather than someone who was lifting on a platform. Mm-hmm. So with the Ultimate Sandbag program, what we call dynamic variable resistance training, we look at how to manipulate different angles and positions of strength. Like, for example, we'll take a standard power clean, great exercise, but it's always done in the same position and the same angles. What if we just change your stance? What if we change the angles in which you're power cleaning from? What if we change the trajectory of the weight? Most athletes don't just move up and down. There's only two athletes that really do that, and those are called powerlifters and Olympic lifters. Yeah. So we can start developing power in different positions and postures. The Russians had a term called imperfection training, where they realized that you couldn't rely on just standard weight room practices to bridge that gap from the weight room to the athletic field. So they would employ a lot of different methods to actually try to stimulate the unpredictable environment that sport does. So that's one aspect that our DVRT program offers. Another is that the USB is the only implement that can be stable or unstable. Most people make the mistake of assuming that sandbags are always unstable, and if you go by our system, they're not. So, meaning I can have two different sizes of USBs, and they can be the same weight, but they can feel completely different based upon their dimension. One can be far more unstable, one can be more stable. So there's times that we want a stable implement, there's times that we want an unstable implement. So kind of those factors start playing into how you start programming, because in our system we start really changing how coaches program. And I think that's the most overwhelming thing, is changing a person's thought process and mindset about strength training, because we get sort of really ingrained into certain methodologies and ideas, and this doesn't necessarily adhere to those. So, we change, how we do incremental loading. We don't incrementally load by going up 2 pounds or 5 pounds. We'll change holding position, body position, planes of motion, stability of the implement, all as means of increasing progressive overload. Because in actuality, there's only one implement that really progressive overloads, and that's the barbell. So most other implements should adhere to other principles.
Sure, sure. What when you had the idea to add handles to it, things along those lines. A lot of strength coaches have ideas. They're in a practical setting all day long. How did you take that? What were some of the steps? If they have an idea, I want to create a piece of equipment. What were the steps that you kind of took? Those first steps when you knew nothing about, outsourcing or that kind of stuff. What were the first steps you took to kind of get an idea from start to completion?
Well, we found someone that could actually bring the reality of life. Now, I mean, you have to understand. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that manufacturing is a whole different industry in of itself.
No doubt.
I do appreciate the input because I know I've been there myself. Of input of coaches go, "Oh, why don't you just do this?" And it's like, well, that changes a lot more than you really understand. It's probably best to start off something really small. And you have to understand that. In the world of manufacturing, it's a lot like coaching. The bigger programs that you work with, the more access you have to different ideas and concepts and tools and so forth. But also, the more pressures you have. Manufacturers are only interested in working with you if you're going to keep ordering from them. They're not really interested in making onesies and twosies of things.
Sure.
Initially when you're making a concept, you probably want to find a company that's probably about the same size you are. At the time we found a mom and pop shop that did, a different type of manufacturing of material, but they were able to make us a couple of samples because I didn't know to make this was something I wanted to do outside more than having a few samples myself.
Right.
And then once I realized that this was something really good, is when we started thinking a little bit bigger, and over time, you start seeing what else is out there. But the biggest thing I want to tell coaches is that so many people go ask me that question, like, well, how do I make this a reality? Number one, you have to understand that, when I got into this wasn't a company making a product. This was a coach trying to find a solution.
Right.
And, I saw a problem and I was trying to provide a solution. So you really have to make sure that the solution is something that people are interested in, and the solution can really benefit coaches. Otherwise, especially in today's industry, we're getting inundated with so much stuff. Some of it legitimate and some of it not, that it's getting harder. People are becoming far more cynical in whether or not this is adding value to their program. And so the one thing we really sort of emphasize to coaches is we're trying to add so much value to what they're doing. In the business world, you call it ROI, or return on investment. Yep. So when coaches, invest with us, we guarantee them that they're going to see a high return on their investment, both from the versatility to effectiveness standpoint, especially for the money that they're investing. They're going to, 100 times make back that money in the results that they're able to achieve with their athletes. So you really need to think in a very broad scope of what you're trying to achieve. I mean, if you want to do like I did in the early days, is have a couple of cool samples to yourself and your buddies, that's one thing. If you want to make it into a company, you really got to think about a lot of different factors. I'll give you one more just for the sake of example. People ask about, covering costs of a product. One of the biggest things I did wrong early on was not calculating the cost of the product correctly. And, people think, well, you just got to cover the cost of your product. It's like, well, no, you got to cover the cost of developing educational. Internet marketing. So all those things go into actually pricing a product. And a lot of people don't understand that. They just look at a product and go, oh, they only cost this much. And not only are most people wrong in how much it costs to actually make a product, but they don't realize all these other variables that you have to take into account as well.
No doubt. You mentioned your dynamic variable DVRT, your dynamic variable resistance training, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that certification process or the system in general for coaches.
Yeah, I mean, our goal was to really get away from, I want to really distance ourselves from sandbag training. Sure. Because to me, when people talk in terms of sandbag training, it's a very non-intellectual approach of strength training. If I approach sandbag training in the same way to barbells, dumbbells, or most other implements, you would think I was a pretty lousy coach. But people do it all the time just because they think of it as just a bag of sand. What we want to do is really try to reinvent the way people saw this style of training and give them a sense of progression, purpose, and intent.
Sure.
So basically, our certification is actually what we call as a coaching course. So it's really taking you how you can correct and teach movement very quickly, how you can integrate progressions and regressions, how you program, how you cue, and we correct a lot of movement patterns and actually show people how to progress movement patterns through our system. We offer a 1 and 2 day program. We do tests at the end of the day, but I always tell people that the test is more for themselves to understand the concepts that we think are most important for them to take away with the program. You can come away with cool exercises, but if you don't understand the system, you're not going to necessarily have the value of what we want you to achieve.
Sure. What with all your learning and the things that you have access to, give us a book that you think a strength coach should read, or one that you're reading currently.
It depends what avenue they want to get better at. I think strength coaches nowadays have to be better business people. Even those that are working on the university level, I've had many friends that were at the university level and then end up going into private facilities. So I think coaches definitely have to invest into some of their business development. I know it's something that as coaches we probably don't like to hear. We want to hear about exercises and training and periodization and stuff like that, but I think it's really necessary. So I mean, there's a ton of phenomenal business books if you're interested in sort of the process. There's books like Delivering Happiness, which is a great book about developing relationships and the process of sort of building a company. There's you can't beat books like The E-Myth that are tremendous sort of classic business books. From a training perspective, I think it doesn't get much better than books like Super Training. There's a Science and Practice of Strength Training, I think, by Zasiorski. When it comes to actual strength training books, I like to read a lot more textbook stuff because I think, having written a book myself, you're just getting a person's theories and they're great. I like people like you mentioned, Mike Boyle, it's great, but you're just getting their theory at that time and place. I know coaches, and Mike's probably one that talked about it, changed their views. So, in 3 to 5 years, they may do things tremendously different, but science to me, generally is pretty consistent. Dr. Stuart McGill's work is outstanding, and it gave us a lot of ideas. And that's why I try to look at these books. I try to get ideas because the practical application, like, you and I, Ron, may agree on an idea and a theory, but how we approach it may be completely different.
Absolutely. What about maybe an app that you're using with your clients or something that you use personally from even a time management standpoint?
It's funny. I haven't gotten so much into the app world. That's something I probably should spend more time doing. But I do a lot of like little things. For example, there's great little solutions to coaches on apps. Like from interval timers.
Yep.
One of the things I always used to drive me nuts as a coach is you're trying to coach, you're trying to cue, you're trying to watch people perform, and you're trying to do intervals, and you got to watch your clock half the time, and there's a little solution like that. There's a coaching program, I think My Coaching app or something like that allows you to sort of take a picture of someone's movement, and you're able to draw angles. So sometimes things like that, little simple things that with that coaching app that I just talked about, you can sort of you can really show people what you're looking for. They can see themselves actually doing what you're sort of showing them or what you're telling them to do. Because I know a lot of times, having been an athlete myself, you don't know that you're doing a bad habit or performing a bad habit until you actually see it, and it becomes very eye-opening, especially if you see it compared to what the optimal or what your coach is actually looking for technique-wise. So little things like that I always look for really easy. I look for things that make my life easier.
No doubt.
A lot of times.
What about is there a quote that you live by, or one that's plastered in your weight room, or that you put on every manual, whatever, that you feel like this describes you in general?
Yeah, there is kind of one, because I know there's a big movement, or there's a common thought by a lot of coaches of the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
And I love there's a coach named Scott Sonnen that had a great sort of counter argument to that, which is the CIS method, stuck in stupid simplicity. And I think a lot of coaches, I think what happens when people get overwhelmed by new ideas, or the feeling is that they don't know as much as they thought they did, is they often reject them and go back to what they're comfortable with, rather than diving fully in and trying to really absorb new ideas, new information, seeing how they can apply to their situation. So I'm a big believer in not getting stuck in the CIS method. Foundations are important, but if that's where we stop, we're one of the few industries that believes in not furthering ourselves a lot of times. And challenging ourselves to become better professionals. You won't hear doctors or lawyers or even mechanics talking a lot of the same terminologies or thought processes of, I'm just going to stick with the foundations and not learn anymore. So I think, it's just about elevating our industry and what we can do as professionals.
Sure. Well, I think it's definitely, I think there's most coaches want to continue their education. It's just having the time and with all the time demands that they're placed on coaches, it's a challenge. And I agree with you 100% that it's it's our obligation to make that time, find that time, or to find resources that give us back time. And that's why I mentioned the apps and the books and the different things. It's because I want to give the opportunity to coaches to identify some potential things that could help them in their day. But we're having all kinds of trouble with Skype here. But so I don't want to keep making this a challenge for you. But I appreciate you coming on, man. And I'm going to definitely link up your website and everything you got going on. But if guys want to stay in touch with you, or what are some things that you have popping up here in the near future that you want everybody to know about?
Yeah, we have our fan page that people are always more than welcome to comment, interact, ask questions, and so forth. We put up a lot of content. Our Facebook fan page is Ultimate Sandbag Training. So you just go to Facebook, type in Ultimate Sandbag Training. Our YouTube channel, Sandbag Fitness, one word. We have about 500 free videos, so people can see how we coach, what we're about, how we program, and how we queue. So we also are about to launch some online continuing education courses. So for coaches that can't get away, maybe they're a little, like you said, hampered by time and other commitments, we're going to try to make education a little bit more accessible to coaches. So these are continuing education programs through different organizations like NSCA, NASM, and ACE that coaches can sign up for and take our courses online and get continuing education credits.
Yeah, that's great. Well, buddy, I appreciate you taking the time, man, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Hey guys, before I let you go, a couple quick things I need you to do. First, please join me in the comment section and let Josh know how much you appreciate him taking his time and his efforts to be on Iron Game Chalk Talk and share some great information with all of us. While you're there at my site at robmckeefery.com, sign up for our newsletter where we give you updates each week on new episodes, new Tribe TV episodes as well. And you also get a free ebook for doing so. So make sure you sign up for that. Also like you to check out Strength on Demand. If you go to strength-ondemand.com, and this is a product that Rob Taylor and myself created. It's an online archive of strength and conditioning clinic presentations. And one of the things I talk about quite a bit are time vampires. Time vampires are those things that take away. It's time that you don't get back. Being in the car, driving to and from work, while you're on the cardio, maybe you're on the team bus, traveling somewhere, things like that. Those are opportunities that you can take advantage of, and for your continuing education. And it's hard. It's hard as a strength coach to find those moments because you don't want to take any time away from your family. And so those time periods where you're doing it anyways. You could be taking advantage of that and catching up and staying current on some philosophy and ideas and things along those lines. So check out strength-ondemand.com, and we'll see you next week with another great episode. Take care.